County of Del Norte and the governing body for all other special assessment and taxing districts into session. Only those items that have a scheduled time will be heard at that time. All other items may be taken out of sequence for both staff and public availability. We are going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance, and I am honored to have a guest lead us, California Martin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Introduction of new employees. Any new employees? Okay, well, I have one. And at this time, I'd like to ask Matthew, you want to come up? It's Matthew Leitner, who is the new Executive Director, the Airport Director for the Executive Director of the Joint Powers Authority, the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority.
Correct.
Matthew, welcome.
Correct. Thank you very much. As I've often said, I'm over the moon to be here. This is truly a dream realized. As Chairman Finnegan said, I'm your recently inaugurated Airports Director. I was previously in Jamestown, North Dakota, where we accomplished a number of things, including but not limited to a new airline terminal, jet airline service, wetlands mitigation, runway lighting, electronic access gates, hangars, all kinds of good stuff. So I look forward to repeating some of those same successes here. And as I've said previously, I was removed involuntarily from the state of Oregon about 25 years ago, and I've been slowly working my way back ever since. So this is truly wonderful for me. And I'd like to extend my gratitude to everybody. The community has been so accommodating, so welcoming, so warm. I really feel at home, and I've only been here about 3 weeks. So once again, thank you.
Thank you and welcome. And everything that you mentioned are things that we're going to have to do here too.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
County Council reporting out of closed session. Any actions?
No reportable actions.
Okay. And Chair this time requests any additions, deletions to matters that are on the agenda. In order to put something on the agenda that's not currently scheduled, it would have to arise subsequent to posting the agenda and require action prior to our next meeting. Is there any such item? Okay. Then at this time, let's receive oral reports from the supervisors and start with Supervisor Gitlin.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to report there is a new business in my district, and one that'll put a lot of smiles on folks' faces. Glenn's Bakery and Restaurant is reopening right about Thanksgiving time. And it's been dark for a lot of years. The young family has transferred ownership to Kevin Bingham and family. It'll be known as Glenn's on 3rd Street, Bakery and Cafe. I remember back when we first started coming up here in the mid-90s, we used to have a great hearty breakfast there, and it was good to see that it'll be reopening, and we hope to be one of their regular patrons. After the board meeting 2 weeks ago, I headed up to the Barrow Ranch to have lunch with the boys and Camp Director Ken Burrow. I found Barrow to be exceptionally clean. Staff was highly engaged, and I observed a very healthy environment at Barrow. Tuesday, October 14th, the Solid Waste Authority met at a different time than as our regularly scheduled second Wednesday of the month. One item discussed was to respond to a letter to the editor which misidentified many of the authority responsibilities, and the board voted to direct the acting director to write a Coastal Voices op-ed on the authority and the Recology Authority partnership related to recycling. Hopefully the Coastal Voices piece will appear shortly, this being, of course, election time. And the authority is also moving forward on seeking a new interim director and a special subcommittee consisting of City Representative Mayor Hawley and Vice Chair Mayor Hawley, along with County Representative Supervisor Sullivan, are meeting with staff to determine the parameters of the search for a new acting director while the authority continues to study the R3 consultant's report on the direction of the Solid Waste Authority. It's a slow process, but one which must be properly vetted. Robert Ducart was appointed permanent warden, I learned, at Pelican Bay State Prison. Warden Ducart served as the acting director until the appointment by the governor recently. I also learned the Department of Corrections will need about 7,000 new officers over the next few years, and a need is immediate at Pelican Bay, where there are approximately 130 vacancies. Thursday last, we met in Eureka for North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District. On the way back from Humboldt County, I was very surprised to see underneath the Del Norte County portal. Welcome to Del Norte County. There was a sign where we honor veterans. Pleasure to see that up. Friday, October 17th, I attended the Veterans Resource Day and met many of the helpful VA staff from Roseburg. I related my concerns to the staff there about the telephone system at the VA was not exactly user-friendly, as it was extremely difficult for our vets to actually access a live voice. The VA staff concurred and promised the phone system would be more user-friendly to our vets. Wednesday, attended a special meeting on the board on a closed session matter. Nothing to report at this time. Last Thursday, attended an employee benefits workshop at the VFW where I had the opportunity to meet some of our dedicated employees over lunch, and I want to thank Amy Cox and her team for organizing and hosting the event, including John Horner and several employees of the Roads Department in preparing a lunch and a job well done. This past week, I met with several constituents and business owners in District 1 who expressed their concerns about the ongoing begging practices, the panhandling issue, on Washington Boulevard and Summer Lane. The board will be addressing this issue later this morning. And as you are aware, the Red Cross is closing its Humboldt County office, which serves Del Norte County. Just prior to learning of closing, management in Arcata actually had sent me a request for nominations for people in the community who have been exemplary community service individuals, and I nominated our Take a Bite Out of Blight volunteer Kathleen Benskin of Crescent City for her exemplary work in reporting areas where blight exists and working to remove graffiti and trash from the community. I also nominated the Crescent City Lions Club for its superb work in providing eyeglasses for those in need who cannot afford them. And the Lions Club also announced at that time that its partnership with the Take a Bite Out of Blight program, and will be assisting in several upcoming efforts, including weed and trash abatement from the public rights-of-way and medians supervised by Caltrans. Thank you, Crescent City Lions Club. Also want to cautiously remind everyone here, and those who are listening, that the California Highway Patrol in Del Norte County has been granted a $100,000 grant for overtime, so CHP officers will be more vigilant in observing your speeding practices and cell phone usage. That's a warning, don't do both. It's all in an effort to reduce the high accident rates in Del Norte County. So the words of the wise is, please slow down, don't text or talk while you drive, and the program will be running through June 30th of 2015. It's particularly dangerous when you do that as winter approaches, nighttime, and lots of things on the road we don't expect, and the weather conditions, of course. Tomorrow, Caltrans Economic Analysis Unit will be in Del Norte County meeting with business owners to discuss the economic impact of a disabled or collapsed last chance grade along Highway 101. And since this is this board meeting, the next board meeting, November 11th, will not take place, I want to invite everyone to the Veterans Day Parade on 8th Street, followed by the annual Veterans Day Dinner at the VFW Post 1381 at 6 o'clock. That's my report.
Supervisor Hemmingson.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be back. I missed the last meeting. The day before our last meeting, I had a complete knee replacement surgery done, so if I look like I'm uncomfortable sitting up here, it's because I am. It's extremely uncomfortable to sit upright. I'll do my best, but I may be fidgeting around and have to get up and down, and I apologize for that up front. And I am going to have to report back a ways back, and I know some of this is going to be redundant because I'm sure other board members have been to some of these same meetings. I started out, had a photo op for our $400,000 Connect Oregon grant for the airport to be used for matching funds. That was a little photo op that we had the opportunity to be involved with, which was good. I spent a few days at RCRC, which I'm sure Supervisor Sullivan and Finnegan reported out on. There was just a few things that I found interesting. We had a presentation from the mayor of Long Beach, which doesn't really fit into our rural counties, but I think he had some good points, and a few of the things that he brought up that I took away from the meeting were that we should be looking for solutions for real problems, not these things that just appear to be problems, which I thought was a good point. He was not a big fan of term limits, which I've been kind of looking into, so it was nice to get his perspective on that. We had a presentation on gambling in California and the economic impacts, problem gambling, just issues like that. Had a presentation from Fish and Wildlife, California Fish and Wildlife, as well as the federal Fish and Wildlife on the gray wolf and the elk issues that we've had in California. There was some very interesting positions on that. Also had some a little presentation on some ethics, and then had an interesting a presentation from a couple of from a winery and Sierra Nevada Brewing Company out of Chico. Did some presentations on how their going green is an economic gain for them, and how they've used that to their advantage. So it was all pretty interesting. It was, as I recall, anyway, it's been quite a while ago. I went to the rededication of the National Tribute Grove in Judd Smith State Parks, as well as attended the luncheon, and had a little presentation from Robert Maxwell, who was a Medal of Honor recipient, which I always think is just amazing, some of the acts of heroism that these people perform. Throwing yourself on a landmine and living through it, or not a landmine, but a hand grenade, and living through it to protect the rest of your group, I think is certainly commendable. I went to the harbor presentation, or the harbor presentation of all the new projects that they've been doing down there, the walkways and lookouts and kiosks and everything that they've got down there, the bathroom facilities, laundry facilities. It was quite a project down there, and it's really, really, really looking nice. So it's looking good. Had some constituent issues that with some drainage things that I spent quite a little bit of time on. I signed numerous amounts of deeds from Pacific Shores to the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority. The first, I think there was 25 properties that I signed, which there's 3 signatures for each one, so that was 75 signatures, and then later on did another 41 deeds. So that process is moving along as far as taking care of the mitigation for the impacts of the runway safety area project at the airport. At an airport authority meeting where we hired Mr. Leitner, who we're very excited to have here, as he got up and spoke earlier. And it looks as though he's been through everything that we need to do, so this should be old hat to him, and he should be able to jump right in and walk right through it. Good luck with that. We also had a proclamation honoring Jim Bernard for his help being past director. We also received the Army Corps permit, as well as the water quality permit, I believe, and then soon to come, hopefully, is the CDP for the mitigation and RSA phase 2 and 3 projects. Went to the Harrington House Chamber Mixer. Also attended a little Border Coast Regional Airport Authority dinner that we had, and attended the Sea Cruise. And then we had a special session that I attended last week, and that's about it for me.
Thank you. Supervisor McClure.
Yes, thank you. Since our last meeting, sorry about that. Since our last meeting, I attended the Coastal Commission meeting that was held in Newport Beach, and missed Sea Cruise because I was still traveling back. Redwood Parks Association, we've met. We have a plan that we're trying to move forward and expand our giving. We're working on a project to put a platform around the Stout Grove tree because it's being pretty much loved to death with people wanting to get to it. So it will be a lot like the tree in the Founder's Grove down in Prairie Creek. EMS, we had a phone conference meeting, Office of Emergency Services. We talked about Red Mountain, and they are supporting our request to the Forest Service to make sure that the Red Mountain stays active so we can continue to have the type of coverage that we have experienced with our emergency personnel and police. I too participated in this special session. There's nothing to report. I had the opportunity to participate in the night market that was held this past weekend, and it was a great little fundraiser with live music and different vendors having their food, and that was all pulled off after 5 hours of no electricity. So I was very impressed that that group were able to continue to move forward, and throughout the cultural center were those little lights that they had been working for hours trying to get stuff set up in the dark, but they pulled it off, so good for them. The Democrats held a chamber mixer at the office of the Democrats and encouraging people to, it was prior to the deadline for registration, but encouraging people to register, and then encouraging people to continue to make sure they vote. There were over, I think, 600 Democratic ballots that were absentees that were not exercised in the June primary. So we're trying to make sure that people participate, and I want to remind people to participate that next Tuesday is the day to vote, but you can also drop your ballots off anytime at the clerk's office, or you can come in and sign up and get a ballot and vote at the clerk's office. So voting is number one, paramount on my mind. And then the other one that always throws me for a loop is to remind you to put your clocks, to change your clocks this weekend, and then we'll have a week of everyone kind of walking around in a haze as to what time it is. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Supervisor Sullivan.
Thank you. Well, I also attended the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting, and am on a committee with Councilman Hawley in regards to working on the interim director. Attended I had mentioned at the previous meeting that John Brunsing had passed, and attended his celebration of life, and really neat guy. It's funny the stories you find out once someone's passed at one of those things, but he did quite a few things before he ended up in Del Norte County, and including being on the record-breaking cross-Atlantic ship for the Ticonderoga, which I had to go find out what the Ticonderoga was outside of my scope, but very impressive, and John never mentioned it. So real neat guy, and he's definitely going to be missed in the community here. So, and then this weekend attended the junior pheasant hunt with my 12-year-old, and I was a little surprised Fish and Game had us out there with rifles in the middle of thunderstorms and the wind blowing. It didn't seem like you want your kid holding a metal rod while there's potential lightning coming up. But anyway, by the end of the day, it cleared up and ended up being a pretty nice deal. But that is a cool event, and I want to thank Frank and Robin Galea for putting that on. They are the main organizers. There's a lot of other people involved, but they're the main organizers. So good event. Attended Rotary last week, had for the presentation by our new airport manager, and it was a good presentation. I do want to put a word in that at some point it would be great, having always flown, and I'm sure Supervisor Finning can back me up on this too, is the chance of San Francisco canceling our flights here. It would be great if there's a possibility at some point to change the hub to Portland, or even Sacramento would be better, just so we're not stuck at the mercy of San Francisco. And in fact, I think you can talk to the local medical community, and they'll tell you the same thing, is that it needs to be consistent, and it's not our fault they're canceling the flight. So I hopefully that will be something on the horizon after I'm off the board. So other than that, that was kind of a brief couple weeks. So
Thank you. I'm going to try not to repeat anybody else's report. Had a meeting regarding first 5 issues with the executive director, finance, State Association of Counties Finance Corporation, board call-in. Participated in the Capital Network charity event, which focuses on mainly children and battered women and all the support groups around that in the Sacramento area. Attended the Board of Supervisors special session regarding the RE5 that you're going to hear more from our CAO on. Had a meeting with several constituents, everything from solid waste issues and complaints to blight on Dundas and other areas. And thanks for the response from code enforcement and CPS on some of those. Had an opportunity to spend some time with family from out of the area, nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters, father. Had several meetings with the CAO, and I want to remind everybody to please, if you would, join us for a groundbreaking out at the airport on Thursday, where we will have the groundbreaking for the long-anticipated runway safety area construction project. And with that, I'm going to ask our CAO to give his report.
Well, over the last couple of weeks, we've been working on a number of things, and particularly I've been doing personnel evaluations, have been dealing with some property donation questions. Interesting enough, we've had a couple of those happen just recently. Miscellaneous meetings with departments, employee negotiations. We had a special session in regards to the COP refunding. It has not yet closed, but we're encouraged that it'll happen in the next week, which will ultimately save a considerable amount of money for the taxpayers, and we will report out specifics as soon as it closes and it's available. Also attended the health fair. That's done through risk management, one of my divisions. Had an OES meeting with a number of different agencies locally and heard about the preparation for Ebola in case something happens in Del Norte County, which is a low risk, but you have to be prepared, as well as the closing of the Red Cross offices in both Humboldt and Del Norte County, and dealing with that issue as we have to prepare in the case of emergencies and who's going to do sheltering and how we're going to then coordinate that. Cindy Henderson is working on both of those. I'd like to thank the Community Development Department and Caltrans for the signs that were placed at the entrances to Del Norte County for the honoring veterans. I think as the board remembers, Supervisor Finnegan had asked CDD to go forward with the process of learning the process from Caltrans, and also then ultimately the board directed them to go through the process with a resolution. And then ultimately those signs are going to be paid for through Veteran Services with outreach money.
Thank you. It's a little early for public comment, so we're going to go ahead and take the consent agenda. Prior to public comment on that, can I get a motion on the consent agenda, please?
I move the consent agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second to pass on the consent agenda, or to approve the consent agenda. Any public comment on any item that is on the consent agenda? Back to the board.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. I have to recuse myself on item number 5. I can't second that motion.
Oh, okay.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Board comment? Pull the vote, please.
Supervisor Sullivan,
Yes, minus number 5, I had conflict of interest due to a business relationship.
Supervisor Gitlin,
Yes.
Supervisor McClure,
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson,
Yes.
Chair Finnegan.
I need to recuse myself on item number 5 also.
Okay.
for conflict.
Okay, before I vote, then I better get some direction from staff. While I do not believe I have an actual conflict, it has the appearance of a conflict on number 5 as well, because I am a tenant to the person that we are voting on that agreement, that rental agreement, lease agreement. But there's only 2 people that are scheduled to vote on it, so do we need a third?
As it's a contract and you're a tenant of the person who has, I guess the question is, what are some of the other conflicts? I can.
There aren't, oh, okay, go ahead.
He's a customer of mine,
Okay.
one of the owners.
And is Dan Harrison still in this contract? I believe there's a partnership between the two of them.
It might be,
so
I don't know.
He's a client.
Okay.
And while I'm not affiliated with the lease building for lease
And you're not getting any
specifically,
money out of
and
the
I'm not getting any money
contract
back, I
either.
do rent from him.
I would say that in that situation, since we probably do need a third person, that it would be okay in order for this to pass to go ahead, because you're not actually getting
Okay.
any sort of monetary benefit from the contract.
Register me as a yes, please. There was a couple of resolutions. proclamations, actually, and that were passed as a part of the consent agenda. The first was to approve and adopt a proclamation proclaiming the gratitude and honoring all veterans on Veterans Day, as requested by myself. And I'm going to have a special guest again, California Martin, who, as you probably recall, whose son gave his life in the armed forces, Bruno Di Salini. I'm going to ask her to please read this.
Proclaiming gratitude and honoring all veterans on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2014. Whereas November 11th is nationally celebrated as a Veterans Day, and whereas millions of veterans throughout the United States have fought for our country, and many of those lost their lives so that we might enjoy the freedoms that we have today, and whereas millions of veterans have suffered horrific physical wounds and disabilities, including mental and emotional issues affecting a lifelong hardship on them and their families, and whereas veterans deserve the respect and honor that this day only begins to give throughout the year, and whereas the Board of Supervisors would like to acknowledge and honor all veterans for their part in our fight for freedom, now therefore, the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors proclaims its gratitude to those who have served in the armed forces on behalf of the United States of America during both peacetime and wartime. Be it further proclaimed that the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors hereby encourages members of the community to participate in the November 11th, 2014 Veterans Day.
Thank you. Jay, do you want to explain where that proclamation is going to go now?
We will pass that forward to the Veteran Service Officer, who will then be able to post that at the Veterans Hall, as well as get copies to any of the individual groups and honor them also.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Also passed as part of the consent agenda was item number 4, proclamation declaring November as National Adoption Awareness Month. Supervisor McClure, would you please read that?
Yes, thank you. It's the proclamation of the Board of Supervisors. Whereas for over 25 years, the California Department of Social Services Arcata Field Office has been the agency adoption program in Del Norte County and has provided adoption planning for Del Norte County's children who are in need of permanent families. And whereas in the 25 years, the California Department of Social Services Arcata Field Office has found homes for more than 700 children and placed them with families who have made a lifetime commitment through their adoption. Whereas each year, the California Department of Social Services Arcata Field Office serves families in need of independent adoption programs, and whereas the California Department of Social Services Arcata Field Office provides education, training, and support for families interested in adoption, and whereas the California Department of Social Services Arcata Field Office and the Post-Adoption Support Project join to support and promote adoption to provide post-adoption services, and whereas the California Department of Social Services has joined with tribes, tribal courts, and Del Norte County Department of Health and Human Services and the Del Norte Superior Court to finalize numerous tribal customary adoptions. Whereas the California Department of Social Services Arcata Field Office has joined with Del Norte County Department of Health and Human Services to implement a comprehensive concurrent planning program that expedites permanency and minimizes the number of moves for children. And whereas the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors hereby declares November 2014 as National Adoption Awareness Month, passed in this day of October 28th.
Thank you. Is anybody here to receive that? Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Sudie Wheeler, Supervisor at the Arcata Field Office of Adoptions. And on behalf of our office and the state of California, I want to thank you for recognizing November as Adoption Awareness Month. It's an important opportunity to shed light on the incredible contribution that our adoptive families make to children in need of permanence. And so it's an honor to recognize November as Adoption Awareness Month. I want to thank the Department of Health and Human Services for their leadership and collaborative efforts on finding homes and supporting our families in adoption. I want to recognize Michelle Moore, who is a foster and adoptive parent in our community and who has worked tirelessly to not only support her children, but also improve recruitment and retention services for our constant recruitment of adoptive families. And I really appreciate all the effort that we do collaboratively, from eligibility workers to county council, in terms of securing permanence for children. As most of us know that provide the service, adoption does not end with the finalization, but is rather a lifelong process. So we are fortunate in Del Norte County to have post-adoption services. So I wanted to take this moment to introduce Cindy Savage, who is the director of the Post-Adoption Services Project that is serving Del Norte County. And on behalf of all of us, would like to thank the Board of Supervisors for recognizing November as Adoption Awareness Month. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And again, on behalf of the board, thank you very much, not only to the Arcata office, but also to our local staff and everybody that's involved in the adoption process, including the parents, the adopted parents. Without them and without the education to get more in the program, we couldn't do anything. So thank you all. And with that, we are going to do public comment. Any member of the public may address the board on any item that was within the purview of the board. If it is scheduled later on the agenda, I might ask that you hold your comments if you also want to speak at that time. So is there anybody that would like to address the board on public comment?
Good morning. My name is Steve Perez, and I'm the pastor of Hiuchi Community Fellowship. Over the past few weeks, I've taken some time to just review some of the video presentations or recordings of the meetings of the Board of Supervisors, and I have to acknowledge that I've observed some really interesting conversations, and also, though, in general, real patience. Real patience. I want to talk a little bit this morning and just share a little bit with you to encourage you on this idea of the voice of governance. As a pastor within this community, I'm a listener oftentimes to individuals and maybe just 2 or 3 people. Through that process, I'm learning to hear without judgment and also without predetermination. I find myself listening to more than words. In those words, I'm seeing brokenness at times, spirits of desperation. I listen and I can see joy and I can see peace. There are tones and inflections that reveal achievements and determinations. As a result, my own speech is deeply affected as to what I say, carrying how I respond in every conversation. The voice of governance, though, it is unique. For what you say as a group and individually is a reflection of our community at large. It is the public testimony of the character of our community. I think it's great that we elected you to represent us. Each one of you represents the various intellectual images of our community. And in each of your voice, there's the diversity of ideas that make us individuals. Yet in this house, there is the gathering of voices that speak to our common values and culture. I firmly believe that we are well represented in this House of Governance. Let me probe a little bit. Let me bring a bit of wisdom, just a portion of truth to encourage each one of you every day in your conversations. There was once a teacher who confronted his students about their tongue. He asked a question of them. He says, "Can a spring bring forth fresh water and bitter water from the same source?" As the students were pondering this question, he proceeds and pushes a little deeper. He says, "With the tongue we bless the Lord, and with it we curse people made in the image of God." That not being enough, he pushes forward and says, "From the same mouth comes blessings and cursings." Then he looks at them, each one, and says, "These things should not be so, my brothers and sisters." The language is archaic, and it was being addressed to a fledgling Christian faith, yet it's still of great value to us today. What you say, your voices, the tone, the inflections are visible to all who seek to see the image of our community. I'm glad we elected such committed servants, each one of you being gentle in your wisdom.
Thank you. Any other public comment, please? Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you again. All right, then we're going to go ahead and adjourn as the Board of Supervisors and reconvene as the Board of Equalization and conduct a public hearing for a change of assessment. It was scheduled for 10:30, so we are now meeting as the Board of Equalization.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You have received the stipulation packets.
Yes. There was one other, something that came through in an email yesterday. Was that an agreed upon stipulation?
Yes. I
Okay.
believe that went out to you ahead of time.
It did.
Yes, with the clerk of the board. Okay.
Jennifer, you might announce who you are.
I know. I'm
okay.
Jennifer Perry from the Delmarva County Assessor's Office. Here today, we had a scheduled hearing for Delmarva Point Apartments LP and their opinion of value coming down from what we had on the tax roll was significant. I agreed that it needed a decline as it has a 2005 base, so it does have a base year value from the higher peak of the market here in Delmarva County. So we agreed upon a value of the 445 come down from the 700,000 and 715,000 for the 12-13 and 2013-14 tax rolls.
So we as the Board of Equalization need to take any action?
We're here, all stipulations go before you for final approval. So
Okay.
you guys get the final say. If you want more information on the agreement, we can do a presentation and actually schedule a hearing, or you can sign the documents today.
Sure. Any questions from board members?
Yeah, Jennifer, I have one. Were there other APNs as part of this, and they're not part of this stipulation?
Right. The applicant has two different parcels together that they applied on. And for the 2012, 13, 14 tax rolls, they were not the owners for the second parcel. They sold in July of 2011, so 2 of the 4 applications were withdrawn. So
Okay.
they are not in play at all. They've been canceled.
And what was the address on the one that was the parcel number 701, or 700,000, that was the property tax? I think that's the first one.
Let me see. It doesn't have a designated address because it's undeveloped property.
Jennifer, wasn't it vacant land?
Yes, it's vacant land, correct.
Okay.
But it's right over by Joe Hamilton's school, the big empty field over there.
Right. Any other questions? Then can I get a motion to accept the stipulation?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any public comment on this? And back to the board. Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor McClure? Yes. Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan,
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin,
Yes.
Chair Finnegan.
Yes. Thank you very much. We now are adjourning as the Board of Equalization, and we are again meeting as the Board of Supervisors. General Government, item number 17 is to waive the full reading and adopt ordinance amending the Title 10 of the Del Norte County Code Vehicle and Traffic title by adding a chapter entitled Off-Highway Vehicles. Presentation, please.
Good morning. So this project is an item that's coming back that was presented at the last board meeting as far as an introduction. The board previously directed staff to examine different options to allow for the operation of OHVs on what we are considering to be rural, recreational, county-maintained roads. Through that, we discovered that several adjacent counties here in Northern California have adopted similar ordinances, and these are referred to as non-highway ordinances. And again, they're specific to rural, recreational county roads. The ordinance that's before the board today is actually modeled upon the ordinance that was adopted by the county of Lassen. It's effectively the same ordinance, to be honest with you. Obviously, the roads are specific to Del Norte County, but in terms of what the ordinance reads and how it reads, what it was based off in terms of the vehicle code, it's an identical ordinance to what was adopted by Lassen County. The ordinance was presented during the last board meeting during a public hearing. Comment was received from one individual, and that individual expressed concern relating to potential user conflicts and dangers related to the operation of OHVs on the identified road system. Rural recreational roads are classified in the proposed ordinance as being outside of residential areas. These are roads that have been commonly used for motorized recreational activities in the past. And it's limited to identified roughly graded or gravel roads. The rural recreational roads that are included as part of this ordinance include Low Divide Road, Gasky Toll Road, Holiday Mine Road, Patrick's Creek Road, Big Flat Road, and French Hill Road. These roads are all part of the county-maintained road system. They're low volume, they're low speed, and they're minimally maintained. The county road superintendent has reviewed the proposed ordinance, and he has provided support for the project. The California Vehicle Code, under Section 38001, Division 16.5, excludes roughly graded surfaces upon which vehicular traffic by the public is permitted from the classification as a highway. Therefore, this ordinance designates certain rural, recreational county roads as non-highway, and thus eligible for the operation of OHVs. The non-highway designation approach is actually being advocated for also by the California Department of Parks and Recreation, and the purpose of that is to promote their goal of the promotion of legal OHV use within appropriate areas. And if it's adopted, it'll actually put the county, as we talked about last time, into a position of being eligible to obtain OHV license fees, which are known colloquially as green sticker funds. And that would hopefully promote and enhance the recreational opportunities that we do have in Del Norte County for OHV use. And on a final note, just to be clear, this is not a combined use designation. That's a different legal designation under the Vehicle Code, Section 38026, which only applies to highways. This is a non-highway ordinance. And that is essentially it. If you have any questions.
Good job. Public, let's hear from the board first. Anybody on the board got anything to say?
You know, Randy, I got to just tell you what a great job you did. And I want to publicly say that this is going to make a lot of folks happy, and this takes back usage of our county. We can now have access to our county when clearly the road was going the wrong way. So I want to publicly commend you and your staff, and well, your staff is with you.
Staff of one.
Yeah.
But thank you.
That you did a great job, and I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Supervisor Hemmingson, this was your baby. You've been working on this for years.
Yeah, I've been
Take some credit.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter, just get it done. Good job, Randy. I
Thanks.
appreciate all the help that you've done. You've really pushed this thing forward, and really appreciate the work that you've done.
Thank you.
Ditto to that. I know the hard work that went into it. I appreciate it. Couldn't have been done without you, and I really appreciate Supervisor Hemmingson there keeping it in front of us. So good job to everybody.
Supervisor Hemmingson has been the critical mass behind this project, so, you know, I'm just at his direction.
Is there a pun in there somewhere?
No, there is not.
Okay.
I too want to thank you for this for pulling this together. And I also would like to maybe put administration on alert that here's an opportunity that I think that we could really do some visitor improvement by applying for some of that green sticker money for some signage that will start to give direction to people using the backcountry, because we probably have more backcountry than most counties have square acres. So it would be an exciting new adventure for us to move on. Thank you for your work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll just reiterate. Good job, Randy. I said it at the last meeting. It does allow, and Supervisor Hemmingsen's been the lead on this thing from the beginning. It does, the Forest Service was happy to hear that we're doing this on, because one of the issue with the off-highway vehicle stuff is there hasn't been a loop. So you literally had to drive down a road, drive back, reload your OHV, and then go to the next road. This will allow, this basically develops some loops, and as it said before, it allows us to access money we haven't been able to get to before. So good job. Thanks.
So can I get a motion to waive the full reading and adopt the ordinance amending Title 10 of the Delaware County Code by adding a new chapter entitled Off-Highway Vehicles?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment on this? Back to the board, final comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Ordinance, do I need to poll the vote? Probably should. Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingsen?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. And again, taking a problem and turning it into a positive. Randy, thank you very much. Good job on behalf of the community and the board. We do have a 10:45 timed item, and that is the third grade reading proficiency presentation. Don Olson, Superintendent of Delaware County Unified School District. Don, I see you brought some help with you too.
Thank you. I brought my team with me today, and I believe we're going to have some information up here for you very shortly.
Good.
Well, first of all, thank you for your interest in Delaware schools, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to the board about third grade reading scores and above and beyond. Our main goal is to increase student achievement, and you're going to see some information today that really addresses that. So first of all, as soon as we get, is your screen live yet?
Yes.
Yeah, our screen's on.
And, well, I'll just, I brought my cabinet today, Steve Godla, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, he'll be addressing you shortly today. Connie Gilman, Director of K-8 Curriculum, and Colleen Parker, our HR Director, past principal of Delaware High School, and she's truly has great expertise in the area of career technical education, and we'll be giving you a short piece on that as well. So to start with, about 3 years ago, we were funded by the California Endowment Building Healthy Communities to study a new educational model. And so we looked at several models, and what we came up with was the Del Norte Engaged Learning Model. Educational reform is an age-old topic, and if it was that simple, everyone would take the new model and have it done tomorrow. The best country in the world is Finland, and they've been at it 24 years now. So the idea is that you put something in place and you show incremental improvement each year. And we will show you today that we are doing that. And I'm going to ask Mr. Godla now to address a little bit about our Del Norte Engaged Learning Model and the cornerstone of our school system now.
Thank you, and thanks for having us. As Don mentioned, what we call our educational program for the district is the Del Norte Engaged Learning Model, or the DNELM, and there's three major components to it. One is professional learning communities. That's our foundation. Another is student achievement and engagement, and the third is community engagement. Professional learning communities, or PLCs as we refer to them, really is how we're operating as a district. It's, you know, really at its essence is it provides an opportunity for educators once a week to collaborate at grade level, subject level. They're focused on student work. Teachers get together, they have common assessments. They look at these assessments and they use those assessments to inform future instruction, so it's not random. They're looking at this and talking to one another, what worked for you with this group of students, what worked for you, where are we falling behind on this assessment? So instead of teachers working in isolation behind a closed door, they're working together and collaborating to improve instruction. So that's PLCs are how we address other educational problems in the district. One thing that comes up from time to time is students may say that, instruction isn't working and we need intervention, or parents say that. So we use PLCs to identify best practices for interventions. If you go to the next slide, I can't see up there, one of the other components of the DNELM is community engagement, college and career, and intervention. So we look at data to inform what we're going to do. I think the slide you're looking at is, they were on that one, so go ahead to the next one. This is socioeconomic, or our poverty rate for students. If you notice over the 5 years that you have there, it looks like between 6 and 12% our poverty rate is above the state. We realize that there's many factors that impact student learning, and we need to address and acknowledge and be cognizant of all of these factors. This, and several years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, we wrote a counseling grant to provide more counselors district-wide, and one of the facts that came up is that, Del Norte County, as all of you are probably aware of, has the highest per capita rate of neglect and abuse in the state. Along with our poverty rates, that's something that we can't ignore, so we need to address these issues that may be preventing students from learning, whether it is counseling or some type of academic intervention. But through the DNELM, we are addressing both the academic needs of students and socioeconomic needs. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Gilman to talk.
I'm next. Okay.
Mention AP.
I will. So, next, and once again, I do apologize, just the audience isn't able to see. So the shot you have in front of you is a 4-year history of student reading scores for English language arts. And as you can see by Ms. Gilman here, and up there, the red line at the top follows the state trend. There was a bit of information that was published recently by a group called True North or Far North, and basically one of the questions to all the prospective board members coming in was, Del Norte scores are greatly below the state averages. What are you going to do about this if you're a new board member? Well, one thing that one of our concerns was they didn't come and see us about what the true scores are. And so what we found is that, yeah, are we below in some areas? Absolutely. Do we exceed state averages in some areas? Absolutely. And have we made growth over the years? Absolutely. And so I know that there was a statement that had kind of went around a few weeks ago that may have been the impetus to ask us to come and address you, was that third grade reading scores are used to predict future prison populations. And upon researching that is absolutely erroneous. It is actually something fabricated on the internet. When you actually just Google our third grade reading scores used to predict future prison populations, and you will see many, many articles come up that it is untrue. Even the director, a main person at the California Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, states that we don't use data like that. However, third grade reading scores do have some data or some significance, and as you can see from this chart in front of you, our current proficiency rate for reading is 43%, and the state average is 46%. So are we below it? Yes. Do we want to be above it? Absolutely, and we're working to get there. But more importantly, third grade reading scores have other significance, and the first one being that if you're not a grade level reader by third grade, you are 4 times more likely not to graduate by the time you're 19 years old. And then when you throw in, if you are a low-income student in third grade that is not reading at grade level, you are 12 or 13 times more likely to not graduate. So poverty has a greater significance than that. So in studying this, we looked at our second and third grade scores for about 4 or 5 years now, and we were continually perplexed at why aren't we at, near, or above state averages, because we knew we were teaching strong, we knew we had the right curriculum in place, etc. And it wasn't until we were asked to meet with Hetty Chang, the National Advisor on School Attendance, and really look at the possibility that maybe attendance was our issue, that we didn't have an answer. So meeting with Hetty Chang, we found out that kindergarten students in Del Norte County were over 30% of them were chronically absent from school. That our first grade students were 28 or 29% chronically absent. We knew that as a school district we were battling a culture that it's okay not to go to school. So we have put significant time and effort because we cannot teach the absent. We have to make sure that we increase our attendance rate. So last year, our data's back. Last year, thank you, our attendance rates was our best year ever in the history of Del Norte schools, I believe. Most schools exceeded a 95% attendance rate. Every principal, every school team is working to incentivizing attendance, making positive outreach to families, finding out what the barriers are to get students to attend school. And we had one school reach a 98% attendance rate. So first battle was we have to get the students into school. So we're working on that piece because that was our biggest barrier. And it wasn't just in first and second grade. We had a dip in sixth grade and then senioritis in 12th grade. And we're still addressing that. So as you can see from the chart now, we are at or near or exceed in a variety of areas. And we want to exceed in all areas. So we have Connie Gilman here, who is our K-8 curriculum instruction lead. And she is a literacy expert, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing to increase reading skills across our district.
I wouldn't exactly say expert, but I have worked with reading for a very long time. So I just wanted briefly to tell you that we're using SIPs in all of our K-4 classrooms, systematic instruction and phonological awareness, phonics and sight words, and we do a lot of phonics and decoding early on. And then once the children understand how to read, then we work on comprehension more closely. Making Meaning is the program that we're using. And then we're also have implemented a Being a Writer program because writing is such a huge part of being able to communicate as an adult. So those are the programs that we're currently using at all of our sites. And this is Max, and this is Ashley from Mountain School. I had to include some children in our presentation. Okay, math folk.
Now you have 4 years of mathematics in front of you, and you can see that we've even gotten closer to state averages, and we exceed more often. So I know it's important that we get out and tell the good story about education in Del Norte County. And some of our grade levels that greatly exceed the state level are 7th grade in some areas, 8th grade algebra, we're well above the state averages, 10th grade algebra 2 and 11th grade algebra 2. So we have made significant improvements in mathematics. And what's next slide, Connie? So, Colleen Parker, Career Tech, yeah.
So I hear often, well, but what about my kids not going to college? And the reality is what we've done at Del Norte High specifically is increase the number of CTE programs available to students. And you can see the numbers there that we're increasing enrollment. And there's a Carl Perkins report that we do annually. And that report shows that the state requires an 85% graduation rate for students in career tech ed programs, and we have exceeded that in the last 3 years. So we're well on our way to doing some great things in CTE. You'll also see up there the AP enrollment. We are up in that area this year, especially we've added back the AP US History, and so you see an increased amount of students taking AP courses as well.
You know, I do have one question on that. This stat, and I know I've asked this before too at different presentations, but what is the graduation rate from college or career or a voc ed school? Because this is just showing that kids took a class the next year after they graduated from high school. What's the actual graduation rate for those kids from college or even JC as far as that goes?
That we don't follow. We're required to look after 1 year after high school, and that's what we look at as if they are in, and we're meeting those requirements as well. We have to basically contact the graduation. So this year's graduating seniors in 14, we will be calling in December and saying, what are you doing? Is it related to the career tech ed field you were in? Are you in college? Are you in the military? Are you working in the field? And so we report that data out as well, which is not in that slide.
Okay.
This next slide is the overall district's academic performance index. This is a measure, grades 2 through 11, math, language arts, proficiency testing. And so you get a number, and as you can see, for the last 5 years, we've gone up each year. Granted, 1 year we only went up 1 point, but it's been a positive trend, and we're proud of that. We realize that we have a lot of work to do, but you want to take a time and celebrate the successes you do have. And Colleen just mentioned AP courses, so we want to take this opportunity to celebrate another success. AP Calculus, we had 20 students take the AP Calculus test. This is a test that will give students college credit for calculus. We had 17 students take year 1 calculus test. Oh, no, excuse me, 18 students, and then 2 take year 2. Of the 20 students that took the test, 19 got a passing score for credit in college, which would probably be the envy of any prep school in the country. So if you see Gary Hull walking around the streets, give him a pat on the back, please.
Thank you, Steve. And then finally, living on the North Coast is great. Been happy to call this my home for the better part of 60 years. We've found that there's great local expertise here. Our SIPs, our phonics trainer, and becoming a writer and making meaningful reading, we found an international trainer that lives in Brookings. And so we have the joy of accessing this trainer. She comes and works with every K-5 teacher. She's in their classroom doing model lessons. She's watching them teach and critiquing them. And we have become stronger as a school district in the area of teaching reading. And we know that ongoing professional development is vital to the work that we do, and we are continuing to do that because our goal is that every student's a grade level reader at 3rd grade. So the last slide is, we said we'll take questions. We encourage you to visit our schools. Through the community input, we brought back the carpentry program. It was a great, really a collaboration between community and school district, and local contractor Don Hartley's leading that, and we put a couple pictures up on that. But we would love to answer questions now or have you visit elementary or secondary schools.
Thank you, Don. Questions for comments from board members?
I do have
Jerry?
A couple of things. If I'm next. And Don, I really appreciate this. You kind of took a defensive stance, and that's not where I was coming from when I requested the meeting. Mine was more informational. I'm glad you clarified the prison population not being attributed to the 3rd grade. That was something I was told, and I kind of, I guess, passed that on. So I guess I'm the culprit in passing on information that was incorrect. So I appreciate you getting to the bottom of that. My issue has always been the things that I look at are solution oriented, and you brought up the fact that, and we all know this, that you certainly can't teach somebody that's not there. So if that's part of the solution, then we need to be working on that, because we need to get these kids at a reading level, at this third grade reading level seems to be the point where the focus is being put.
Can you go back to that reading slide, Connie?
And I would, I'd like to see how if we have a way, I don't know how long you've been tracking this, or if you've been tracking it from when you started, and as these numbers increase or decline, if down the road we're seeing the impacts of what's happening there. Is there any way that we can put that stuff together?
Absolutely. ELA score. So, Jerry, and first of all, no defensive position intended whatsoever. And we are solution oriented, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you, because it shows that you are interested in this community, and we all want the same thing. We want a better educated Delaware County, because better educated people make better health choices, better choices in their social lives, et cetera. So as you see this dip here where it goes from second to third, there's that kind of a sharp line.
Right.
That's called the third grade dip. And that's the statewide dip. In second grade, we read the test to the students. In third grade, they read the test. And that is the most difficult testing year everywhere in California. So there's what is that, about a 10-point swing, Connie? Yeah. There's about a 10 percentage point swing. Same kids, year to year, you could track by cohort, but we're aware of that. And then some of the work that we're kind of proud of, when you get to 7th grade and even up into 8th grade, we found that when we had 46% of our students proficient in 3rd grade, we boosted those numbers close to 70 at the end of middle school. High school is a little different issue, because sometimes it's a little bit about apathy or not taking the test seriously, et cetera. So we're definitely interested in tracking this over time. We know that in my opinion, 3rd grade is not a great indicator, because it's a low point in California test scores. I tend to look at what are we doing to those students between 3rd grade and when they get to the high school age, and we're showing that we're significantly increasing those their reading abilities.
I appreciate that, and the poverty level always comes up in these situations, and I always think that that's our road to success, is being able to read.
Yes.
So that's how we get out of poverty. So we're trapped in this loop.
Yes.
What do we need to do first?
Right. Well, and we know, well, number one, we have to have them in the building. Right. And then the most important thing is high-quality instruction. High-quality instruction beats poverty, beats race, it beats everything. So we're working hard to have our teachers all trained in the same manner, to have the best teaching skills, et cetera, so that we're really developing or delivering the most high-quality instruction possible. Because as happy as we are that we've increased consistently over the last 5 years, we're, as Tony Fabricas always says, we're happy, never satisfied. We always want more, and I think that's a trend here that we're going to keep moving forward with Del Norte County schools.
And the other thing that beats poverty is early intervention, and we work very closely with our state preschools that we have on our campus. I work very closely with Patty Vernelson at First Five.
Correct.
And Don has started a county preschool class this year, paid for by the district. So we're working really hard in getting kids into preschools, because kids that go to preschool have a much higher chance of graduation.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, Connie. And this really is, Don, I want to thank you and your team for being here. It is a partnership, and Jerry wanted to shoulder some of the blame, but there's no blame about this. We're all concerned. Right. It's not just the school's kids. It's a community vision for the supervisors. But we come by it honestly. A year and a half ago, as president of State Association of Counties, I had the Year of the Child initiative, and the people we were talking to was the Chief Justice, whose initiative was truancy, something you spoke to, and Kamala Harris, the Attorney General, who did bring it up, that 3rd grade level reading proficiency is a measuring stick. And so we came by that honestly. Well, I see what the problem is that the reason it dips, you call it the third grade dip, is because you read to them and then they have to read for themselves, which really highlights some of the excellent work that's being done in this community, as Connie pointed out, with First Five, with the Wonder Bus, at the Family Resource Center, with the schools, with the preschools, to teaching children how to read sooner. And I think
Right.
the outcomes as a community is we're all winners. So I thank you.
Good. Yeah, as we know, the earlier we can intervene with students, the better off we'll be. So we're working hard to increase preschool. This year with the LCFF, we added a preschool program. Brooke Davis, the administrator in charge of preschool, just received a letter yesterday from State Superintendent that we're going to receive an additional $150,000+ to add preschool for an additional 30 students. So once we get the money in hand, we will actually be adding another preschool or 30 more slots this year, but we appreciate your interest.
Supervisor Sullivan.
Well, in statistics, obviously you guys have done a good job of finding out where the hole in the process was the kids weren't attending, but it does come back to the fact statistics reveal a lot about what's going on, and I know we've talked about it, and I know the district committed to tracking some of these kids statistic-wise, not like tracking them into a program, but tracking where they go, what they do. Is that an active process the school district's doing now?
So are you referring to post-12th grade?
Yeah.
There is, the counseling office, when students leave, they try to get an email address, et cetera. And so, do we have a formal process in place? Not yet, but we do collect information when we hear back from students. Even though we're a high-poverty county in California, we graduate in the district 95% of our students. Admirable number, much above the state rate. And we're just slightly above countywide, the actual state average. And yet, we're dealing with significant issues of poverty here that many areas in California don't experience.
Yeah.
So we would like a better means of tracking these students. We hear bits and pieces, but we don't have a means in place now so that every departing senior or graduate has a means to report back to us.
Well, and I guess to follow up that too, because to determine whether the program's successful with the PLC program is you got to have a baseline. So the only way to do that is to start to track the kids statistics-wise to see if it's working, what's effective. And also in terms of the kids that are dropping to the wayside, because 95% is the graduation rate. Is that taking all the way back to the kids that started in the program and what happened to them along the way? I mean, how many dropped out, how many went to Sunset, how many went to charter, all those things?
Sure. Well, honestly, Mike, we use the calculation model that the state of California provides for us, but one of the biggest issues that faces us is 300 freshmen enter, and then a couple years later, it's 200.
Yeah.
And so, as you can see, I mean, the best place for our students is in a comprehensive system. Now, granted, we respect the rights of people to educate their children in other means and alternative settings, but from what I've seen, my preference is I want my children, and my children did go through a comprehensive system, but we have to have, we live in a community that has significant needs poverty-wise, and so we have to have safety nets, and we do a pretty good job of that. But our biggest issue is because when they leave Delaware High School, the revenue leaves. You lose 100 students, you just lost 600 grand that year. And the following year, you lost another 600. And it's not about the money, because really it's the same thing as absenteeism. We can't teach students in a comprehensive manner if they're not in the building.
Just two questions, and I'm sorry. So one of the other things was career technical education, and I know we've talked about this before, beginning to offer a lot of those voc ed programs, as well as living skills classes like personal finance, which I know when I went through Delaware High, you had to take a general business class. It was required local, that was a local requirement, and that's not a requirement anymore. Correct. And it's one subject you can't escape no matter what occupation you go into. The follow-up question to all of that is, the PLCs was the first step. What is the next step the district is going to do to begin to change? I mean, what's the next step?
So, first of all, the PLC will be the foundation of our work. It really answers the 4 questions: what do we want students to know? And most importantly, how do we know if they know it? And what do we do if they do? How are we going to enrich their lives? What do we do if they don't? How are we going to reteach so that they know these important skills? So we want to greatly polish that. The next step is we have responded to career tech ed courses. I attended Delaware High like many of you here, and I think when I was in Delaware High, there were 4 full-time business teachers. There's not one today, and I don't really have the answer to that. Colleen may, so.
Yes, I do. We added the 21st century class that Ron Gastineau is teaching this year. He's new to us, doing a great job, but we've added a finance piece to that program, and then we've added lessons throughout the academic seminar through the years, and then, of course, government econ, or economics covers some more finance. We need more. We need it at the lower grade levels, but it is a start. You talked about attendance a little bit ago, and one of the things that you asked how you help as a community, one of the things we need is our employers to be asking our high school students as they're hiring them to bring their attendance records. It's a 1-sheet page they can bring from the high school attendance, because our students don't see the connection between going to school and building the habit of getting up and going to work every day, and then going to work every day as an employee and as an employee. They say, well, when I get paid, I'm going to go. Well, we all know that once they're comfortable, their habits return versus I'm getting a paycheck all the time. So employers could ask that, and then ask your employees, how is your kid attending? Are you helping your kid make sure they're getting there every day? That's what we need from the community. That would really benefit us greatly.
Okay. Supervisor McClure, you had a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to, having been a teacher in the trenches all these years, that it is one of the most isolating professions, where we have this view that all the teachers are together and everybody's planning the day. And in reality, once the teacher goes into that classroom, they're kind of in their own starship, so to speak. And so the PLCs, I think, is breaking down that isolation, which I think is really important. And then I would urge people, when they look at this ELA chart and you see that drop off in the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, not to panic, because that is typically when children have a tendency to say, I really don't need to please my teacher anymore, so I'm not going to take this test very seriously. And so don't think that we've lost kids in their ability to read and write in this level. It's primarily that they've learned to say, I'm not going to pay attention to the test. And the state of California has forced the district that everybody who is tested is scored, even if a teacher, no longer can a teacher write that this is an invalid test because she or he sat and watched a student answer 150 questions in 45 seconds and spelled out a couple of words as they filled in the bubbles. That test still counts. So you can't take all test scores and say, well, these teachers must be pushing the kids off the cliff. Probably not the case. It's a deeper dip when you look at testing. So I just want to say that I think you're doing a great job, and these scores are very good considering what I know tests look like. Thanks.
Final board comments from anybody?
Yes, Don, I just want to make an observation to you and your staff. Excellent job. But I can't underscore what Supervisor Sullivan referred to as technical education, vocational ed. College is not for everyone. Correct. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And I would like to have your board actually review lowering the threshold where you're introducing technical ed at a lower level than perhaps at the high school level. Mm-hmm. Because that's the prize too. If someone comes out of the system educated and can make a living, that's the winner. And I'm reminded by the fact a couple of years ago, I was looking to have my dishwasher repaired, and I had to wade through 20 pages of attorneys until I find appliance repair, and there were 2. Not 20 pages, but 2. So we have plenty of attorneys, plenty of education, but who's going to fix our dishwashers? Who's going to fix our electricity when we have these issues? And that is the prize also. So please don't underscore that as you work with some of these great kids. College isn't for everyone, and the success is, can they make a successful living doing something other than going to 4-year schools?
Okay.
Well, thank you. We see the importance of that as well, and we would like to arrange a tour for you to come to Delaware High School and really come into these career tech ed classes and see 21st century.
Well, we used to
schools.
have board meetings there, and perhaps we can schedule it along that lines again, Don.
Perfect. And then in closing, Hetty Chang, the National Advisor on Attendance, has been so impressed that she featured Del Norte County School District's attendance rates, and we were on a nationally televised webinar with New York City, New Bristol, Connecticut, Crescent City. Anyway, it was great to have the opportunity to share our success story with the rest of the country, and it really is a testament to the work that's been going on here. And thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any
Thanks,
member,
Don.
I should ask, any member of the public have something they wish to comment on or a question? Okay. Don, you and your team. Oh, there's always somebody that's got to raise their hand late.
Thank you. I guess the comment is about the power of information that comes from a government body and is given to people. A significant amount of work and effort's been going into addressing reading levels with third graders who may go to prison. Obviously, it's a significant issue. It didn't change the fact that the third grade reading level is a very significant item. It also, Connie may want to address, I think we talked about in another meeting, the statistically at third grade, yes, that does exist, but apparently in some of the statistics, many that the population exits, some of those taking the test, which otherwise brought the score down. Is that inaccurate? Say that again. In the meetings we had the other day, the third graders taking the test who potentially brought the score down, we see an exit of those students before the sixth grade test is taken.
Yeah, so what Kevin is talking about, back in the day, I was the reading recovery teacher leader for the district, and I worked with the training teachers to work with the most at-risk first grade students. And when we were deciding whether or not to keep the program, we tracked the kids through the fifth grade, and when we ended up at fifth grade, we had a lot of kids that we served that were no longer in the county, because we do have a pretty heavy-duty transient rate with our low-income families. And so what Kevin's saying is some of the kids that do the original assessment early on may not be there to take the test down the road.
Did we improve or did we change the population taking the test? The emphasis is still on reading, and that can't be left out. There is significant discussions going on about the access to, use a proper term so it doesn't inflate it, but more participation from the community to help kids at that level, and enhance more robust process that would reach to them early. Even if they exit, they still should be given a shot to read. And maybe they stay, maybe they don't, but that's still a process. I don't think these guys have done a lot of great work. I mean, this is an enormous task. But the idea of raising the bar because we are in such a poverty-stricken area is just the start. That should be the minimum. Success is where it should go, and they have that goal, but it's going to be a community project. There's one other piece to this that was not discussed today, and that's the funding formula that's been brought in by the governor and the state of California. One specific example of that is puts an emphasis on foster children. Work that's going on presently clearly identifies a process of well-intended professionals trying to provide services, but without coordination, it becomes well-intended services that may or may not be even happening, or no one knows, or when it comes to the judge to act as a father, they can't, or a mother, they don't really know the information. There is a project which I would encourage you to ask about, to say, how's it going? Or all the department chairs and heads of services that are providing care to foster folks, are they there? Have you seen the product? Have you seen the results? This project is still in the draft form, but it's extremely important. It's as simple as who really are the foster kids. We talked about 63, but kids that are gone out of the area that we still have responsibility for, money-wise especially, are still part of our foster group. And that's a funding formula area that's in place in the school district funding formula now. English language learners, et cetera, is another population. And the funding continues, and the input from the community is going to make a difference on how that money is invested. I only say it because you guys play a major role in it. I got that one. I got that one.
Good.
So I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you very much. Brought up some very interesting and valid points. Any other member of the public wish to comment?
old. Anyway, I'm Baird Rumiano.
Welcome to the
Anyway,
club.
I am a big proponent of vocational ed. I've given sizable amounts of money to the high school. They've used it graciously and smartly. They have a 3D printer. There's some other things that they've done. They've got some computers that they bought. They've done a lot of good with that money, and it makes me proud that I can be up here and say they're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Baird. Any other public comment? Don, thank you very much. Look forward to the partnership. It is a community partnership, and I look forward to us joining you at the high school for tour and meetings.
Absolutely. And we'd love to report to you on the progress on the local.
Thank you
Great.
very, very much.
Thanks, all of you.
Let's take a
Great job.
3-minute break, and then we'll be back. discussion? Anybody in the hallway out there that wants to join us? No? Okay, very good. All right, numbers 18 and 19, we're going to play by the same rules on both of those. These are issues that deal with the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority, and while we think that there's no conflict of interest, the FAA, who is the funding mechanism, says that there is. So at the last meeting we had, or 2 meetings ago, I guess, we had an abstention by myself and by Supervisor Hemmingson, who are members of both, obviously, this board, but also members of the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority Board, who had to abstain, but it requires a 4/5 vote. We went through a process of drawing straws or flipping coins, whatever it was that we did, drew a name out of a hat, and Supervisor Hemmingson was the one that would come back after the abstention. So we're going to go through the motions. You're going to hear 2 abstentions, and then we're going to immediately revert to the rules that were established 2 meetings ago. So item number 18 and item number 19. Let's take 18 first, which is to approve and direct staff to publish, post, and mail the attached street vacation public notice for the streets within Pacific Shores subdivision as requested by CDD Assistant Engineer.
Move to approve.
Okay, before you do any of that, I'm going to have to abstain. And Supervisor Hemming has to abstain, and because of that, I'm going to leave the room, and Supervisor Hemmingson gets to come back as established at a previous meeting.
Okay, so I won't leave. And, so I guess I'm running the show now?
The next 2.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion?
A second.
And a second. And do we have any public comment? So seeing no public comment, then I will bring it back to the board.
Call the question.
Any board comment?
Yeah, I do actually have a, Rosanna, are you here? I just have a quick question. I know I got some information from you earlier. I'd like you to clarify. Is there any cost to the county on this transaction?
The costs to the county, as far as administrative costs, are reimbursable. We have an agreement with the airport for CDD time. And then as far as the purchase of the land, which would occur at a later meeting, that would be an actual payment for property.
That the county would receive.
Yes.
Okay.
Be revenue. Anything else?
Call the question.
Kylie, would you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Okay, and that was for both number 18 and 19?
Unfortunately, just so the FAA sees the minutes and we do it properly, that was for number 18. Number 19 is to approve and adopt the resolution approving the sale of the designated property of the Border Coast. This was the same thing that we did, except there was a piece of property that was missing, so we have to bring it back to add that piece of property. I have to abstain from this, as
do I.
And under the rules established before, I will remove myself and Supervisor Hemmingson will stay for the 4/5.
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Public comment?
Do we need to read that into? I guess move to approve and adopt resolution approving the sale of designated real property of the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority, the California Joint Powers Authority, as requested by the County Administrative Officer.
Thank you. Public comment. Board comment. Kylie, would you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. All right. Okay.
Thank you very much. Let's knock out the budget transfers, which is item number 7 through 13, it appears.
Move to approve budget transfer 10-05. Move to approve, or 10-06, 10-07, 10-08, 10-09, 10-010, 10-10, 10-11. Designated as items 7 through 13 in the agenda.
Okay, there's a movement and a second on those budget transfers. Any public comment? Back to the board. Comments? Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Sullivan?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. Item number 20 is to consider a proposed amendment. Says to make unlawful the passing of any object through a car window to a pedestrian on the street, and some other things there. Supervisor Gitlin, this is your baby. Why don't you run us
Yes, thank
through
you,
it?
Chair. Several months ago, a retailer communicated with me regarding the ongoing panhandling, the begging problem going on in a particular area of Washington Boulevard near Summer Lane. We looked into it. We're trying to find solutions. Some of the outcomes of these complaints include public urination, public intoxication. Sometimes individuals are passed out. Public image, how it presents to our community. Damage to the lawn, damage to sprinklers in that immediate area on that corner. Loss of business to area retailers, and even potential danger to some of the employees of some of these businesses who approach the people who are panhandling. They have dogs with them. Their dogs are sometimes vicious, so this is a problem. So we looked into this, and we looked around, and we observed what other communities are doing to ameliorate this problem. We looked into the city of Medford, Oregon, which adopted an ordinance 2 years ago, which proposes that it's passed now, the unlawful passing of any object, which can be cash, it can be drugs, it can be anything, through a car window to a pedestrian on the street, and to post the appropriate signage at strategic locations to that effect that allow law enforcement officers to effectively question those who violate the law, and even question the people who are accepting it. So the data from Medford, city of Medford, it's been a success. It was a little rocky getting started, but they've made a number of arrests in 2011 and 2012, and it seems to have cleared out the problem. Now, over the summer months, the Curry County Board of Commissioners adopted a similar ordinance to this Medford ordinance. So that's essentially making panhandling, people holding up signs on the street saying, I'm hungry, or I need money for this, or I need money for that. It makes it illegal in those communities. Well, this is the law of yin and yang. So when an area stops doing one thing and another area stops doing, then people perhaps congregate in an area which is friendly to panhandling. Now, no one wants to get these folks help if they need it, but I'm of the opinion that handing someone a $5 bill through a car window is merely exacerbating the problem. Oftentimes, these are mentally ill and people who are drug and alcohol addicted, and giving them the vehicle to buy more drugs or buy more liquor is not helping them. But I want to stress the importance of wanting to help these folks who genuinely need them, and that's why I think we need to enlist the services of our Department of Health and Human Services and encourage those people. And the outreach of folks like Our Daily Bread Ministries, encourage them to help these people. But I'm of the opinion that it's a public safety issue. People handing objects through windows sometimes causes traffic accidents. And it also is intimidating. It opens up the door for a lot of other issues. So having done this research, I'm of the opinion that we should amend the ordinance 2010-003 and put into question the amending where it shows that we would amend our code in our Health and Safety Code, Chapter 9, to actually implement this change in our current panhandling ordinance to put a stop to this kind of behavior. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, sir.
Okay, so I think it's a good discussion to be had. I'm not sure what correct me if I'm wrong, the ask is to amend our current, or to give direction to whatever, to amend our current ordinance that was adopted in 2010, it's 2010-003, which was the prohibition of abusive panhandling, an ordinance that's been on the books for over 4 years, which does include already stating that it is against the law, soliciting is prohibited when the person being solicited is in any of the following locations, and one of those is specifically, quote unquote, in a vehicle on a public street or alleyway. So it's already prohibited in our current ordinance for the person to be doing it, and you would like to amend it to also make the person donating be subject to criminal activity?
That is correct, as the
Okay.
proposal indicates. It's amending Title 9, Chapter 9.20, to cite the driver of that vehicle, a $75 fee to cease and desist handing objects through the window, such as money or drugs. It's a tool for our sheriff's department to further investigate those who are accepting the money, and it gives the opportunity to stop this practice, which has both legal and social implications which are detrimental to the community.
Okay. Well, now that I clarified what the intent was, there is no actual ordinance before us to pass, so I think it would be to give direction. But I'm going to open up the discussion here to board members first, and then to the public as to what direction they would like to see this conversation go.
I'll be glad to start because I think that I understand the frustration that people have, but I also believe that we have to be extremely careful about our civil rights and about rights of the Constitution that we have. Currently, our Constitution allows for free association, and free association can be the right to ask and the right to give. And I don't believe that either one of those should be compromised. I think that the signs have been fully vetted through the Supreme Court, where it has been identified as a sign that says, we'll work for food, or I'm out of gas, or whatever that sign says is protected under the First Amendment of our Constitution as freedom of speech. It could be equivalent to, in fact, the Arcata anti-sign law was challenged with a person standing next to, on a corner with a sign that said, buy pizza for $5, and a person standing next to them saying, if I were asking on this sign for food, I would be considered illegal. So we have to make sure that when you pass a law, you don't have unintended consequences. So I'm not in favor of stepping on to the rights of the First Amendment, and primarily because I find it starting to take a charity of someone who chooses that as their form of charity to give to someone else, to attempt to make that illegal is kind of frightening to me. Now, do I agree or disagree with the fact that some people choose to offer their charity that way? That's how some people choose to do it. I, for one, would rather give to an organization. But that being said, I can't compromise anyone's ability to be able to offer charity to others. I also find that this is another reach of what many people fear of big government. We have public conduct laws all over the books, and we're all familiar with 647. Normally, we know about 647F, which is drunk in public as a public conduct law. But 647C deals with begging. If people are accosting someone who, there's a law against it. We're very protected. It's a very difficult to enforce it, because if we had a police officer show up over at Washington and Summer and identify the violations of the misdemeanor violations of 647C, they can be issued a ticket and they can leave, and 20 minutes later they're back again, because the problem isn't someone on the corner. The problem is that we have people that are tremendously troubled in our community that we need to figure out ways to address them, and I don't believe that this big government is the way to address them. So far I have the Constitution that I believe is the First Amendment rights for the giver and the receiver, and I also think that this is an overreach of big government, adding yet another law, attempting to make poverty and homelessness a violation of the law, which to me is a very sad state of affairs. Which brings me to my third concern, is that in our Judeo-Christian ethics that we are part of this country, our number one thing is to help the less fortunate than we are. And so to attempt to stymie someone's ability to give, I mean, I have had events where I had a lot of sandwiches left over and took those sandwiches to a corner where I knew there were people standing with signs that were hungry. I don't want to be criminalized for doing that. And I don't want to make a judgment call on how people give, because I understand the significance of giving a $5 bill to someone who might just go buy another bottle of wine. But whatever their demon is what I want to attempt to reach, not to make them punished more. I mean, so to me, this is an overreach, and it is an example of, it's an unfortunate example, I believe, of people making judgment calls on others. And I'm not here to make judgment calls on others. I'm trying to find solutions for others to raise everybody's ability to have a better life in our community. And I think that this is just an example of people who have not wanting to deal with the ugly face of people who don't have. And so for me, I'm not going to support this, and I believe, again, it violates the Constitution. It's an overreach of big government, and it violates the basic ethics of me as a person, knowing that I should help the less fortunate.
Before I open it up to public comment, other supervisors? Supervisor
You
Sullivan?
know, well, I'd like to know what I'm voting on, and that's not in the packet. I mean, this is incomplete as to what, I mean, there really is, we don't, a couple things. First of all, I'd like county council's input on this as to what we ended. We went through this in 2010. We adopted an ordinance. There's an ordinance on the books. I know at the time we looked at the city's ordinance, which I think the city's ordinance has a little more teeth, but our council at the time recommended against it. I'd like to get a second opinion on that. So first of all, county council's input. Second thing is, it doesn't matter how many laws we have, the question is, are we going to have the bodies to enforce it? And I'd like to have the sheriff's input on that, because whatever we pass here, it's going to be up to the sheriff to enforce it. So two important pieces of information. We don't have this in this packet. I need to have that. And, you know, maybe we use Medford's ordinance, maybe we use Crescent City's ordinance, but we need to start somewhere. And I do agree with Supervisor McClure. There is a bigger issue out there. It is a twofold thing. One, you do need the law enforcement side of it. I know I've gotten several calls from businesses involved with this, with panhandlers aggressively, obnoxiously, basically panhandling for donations right at the corner of Walmart and Ace right there, as an example. And that needs to be addressed in one way or the other. You can't just say we're not going to ignore the problem, or we're going to ignore the problem and it's going to go away, because it's still going to. So we need something in place, and we also need the input of, I think, county council and the sheriff in the process. So once we pass something, we need to know it's going to be enforceable, and it's something that will help deal with the issue. The second part of that issue, though, is we have a huge homeless problem in this community, and we have not come up with any solutions to that at all. And it may mean Department of Health and Human Services, but it also may mean law enforcement, and there's a lot of different pieces to it. But I think that is a bigger issue that we're going to have to deal with. But I need something in the packet that that we can at least vote on, because it's not even in a votable form.
Before I turn it over to Supervisor Hemmingson, you're exactly correct. The packet is incomplete. According to the process of what goes on the agenda, it should have been rejected. But I thought that stimulating this type of conversation was more beneficial than to simply put myself out there to say, oh, see, there again, you rejected an idea. So I think it's the idea that we need to talk about and fine-tune the direction that we want to go, whether it's an ordinance or direction or whatnot. So I will accept the responsibility of an incomplete packet, because that's the way it was presented without that communication. But I thought it'd be beneficial that we have this discussion.
Supervisor Finnegan, I'm sorry, before John, I'd be in favor of giving direction to staff to look at our existing ordinance, compare it to the city of Crescent City. The big problem we have in this community is we have too many differing laws, and what we really need is one ordinance, city and county. If we can get it uniform, that would be ideal.
I believe that that's exactly what we did in 2010, that the city and the county's aggressive panhandling
We were going
ordinance
to. We were going to, because the city's ordinance is different than the county's.
I thought
It is,
varied.
because Henyon, or our previous county council, disagreed with parts of it.
Supervisor Hemmingson.
Which was what I was going to bring up, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I remember that, we went round and round over this ordinance in 2010, and we were trying to make it very similar as we could to the city's ordinance. And it got down to, it was a cost thing. So this is where I think this is where the public involvement needs to be, because it's certainly going to cost us a lot more, or at least this is what we found out by the time you try to put these people through the process of citing them and running them through the court system or putting them in jail or whatever you're going to do. So I think we talked about administrative citations and all kinds of these kinds of things came up. And I really think that the city needs to be part of this discussion. I'm always concerned when we have an ordinance that we're picking out of another state. We always get these things, well, in South Dakota, we wrote this ordinance and it was no problem at all, or in Wyoming or New Mexico. But you don't see them say, well, in Arcata or Eureka or Reading or someplace like that, and there may be one. But I'd like to see something along those lines to where we get something out of California that's gone through the scrutiny of California, because trust me, California is different than any other state that anytime I've run into any of these kind of things. So I would like to see some sort of something from the state of California. But I think the overriding thing is, and Martha kind of hit on it a little bit as far as bigger government. I personally don't like a lot of the ways that I've seen this panhandling going on, because I think that the sites that are picked are controlled. I think that there's a hierarchy as far as who gets what corner and how they get them and how they keep them and all that kind of stuff. I don't really like how that all goes on. So I'm not a big fan of what's going on there, and I'd like to see a way of maybe alleviating that a little bit. But I would like to see a little more information on cost, what it's going to cost us. Is the cost going to be worth what we're going to gain out of it? And are we going to be stepping on the rights or the toes of those people that are going to be accused of, that we're criminalizing? And I'd like to see something from a California city or county or something that's actually worked and that they've put in place. So.
Right.
I'd like to respond to some of the statements that were made. First of all,
Supervisor Gitlin, would you mind if we did some public comment and then you could respond to that too, or do you want to respond to everything?
Well, there are some things that have been said about the constitutionality of this. This does pass the First Amendment. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting with County Council Stewart, and she agreed that it does pass the constitutional muster test. That is not an evaluation.
That's a different meeting than I had with her then.
Well, then perhaps she can address the meeting which she sat in and said this doesn't violate anyone's rights, this so-called Medford ordinance. But what we're trying to do here is stop a practice and not criminalize anybody. We're trying to stop a practice which has detrimental effects on our community. This ordinance has, and I'll quote it from the chief of police from Medford, the ordinance has more to do with conduct rather than the act of soliciting than the solicitation itself. So that is what he's saying, and what we want to do is get these folks help. And if help can be given through appropriate social agencies that are here in this service to get people food and shelter, then that's where it should be done, rather than to give someone perhaps the poison to put into their body. And that's what's happening. As far as law enforcement is concerned, we have Commander Athey here. Perhaps he'd like to speak to that, but this is what my understanding is. It gives them another tool to stop a practice that is causing detrimental effects to our community.
Commander Athey, I'll ask you to speak a little later after public comment. I don't want to throw you under the bus to ask you why you're not enforcing the current ordinance. So I am going to. I don't want to see you under both wheels. So yes. So at this time, I'm going to invite the public to join us in this discussion and possible solutions and identifying what the real problem here is. Public comment, and I'll go ahead, and then Steve. Please, from here, yes. And just identify yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Ed Edwards. I'm here to give my own opinion on this based on, excuse me, based on my own observations and having come over here, my family and I, to visit for the last 10, 12 years, and then moving over here and really seeing it in the reality of what is actually going on out there. And although I definitely do see value in what Mike Sullivan, Martha McClure, you, David, and some of the other boards here have as to the infringing on the rights of these unfortunate people, what I have seen and in my own observance is that, and I don't believe I'm wrong on this, I've traveled around to a lot of different cities, and we have an overabundance of this going on in our town. Okay, I don't think I'm wrong on this at all. Okay, so what I have to say is that I am in support of the Medford ordinance for Crescent City for the following reasons. These people out there say they are hungry, but when you offer to buy them lunch or have them follow you to a local, something close like McDonald's, wherever they happen to be, you know, they decline. Well, no, that's okay, you know. Some have a gas can in their hand, you know, they want to, all I need is a couple gallons of gas. Well, you offer to take their can and, hey, let's go right over to the gas station, I'll buy you some gas. I have done these things myself, so has my wife, okay, to try to help people, because we like to help people. The problem is that these people, for the most part, and I'm sorry if I'm saying something that offends anybody out there in this town that are in these kind of situations, I don't mean that intentionally, certainly not. However, in reality, I believe that most of these people out there that are doing this panhandling are doing it, what they're saying and what is reality is something else. They're not being honest and truthful as to their intentions, as to what they want either this money for or whatever. You know, and Crescent City is, like I said, it's full of these people. They're all over the corners. They're every place. You know, they live in the bushes, down in little cubby holes in the beach. You know, I know because we see them from where we live. Okay, one of these people crawled up on our lower deck and tried to break in our house. Okay, so this is not a good element of people out there. I'm not speaking about everybody. What I'm saying is that what my observance is that there's too high of a concentration per capita or whatever you want to say. There's too much of it going on in our town.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up and try to focus on the panhandling issue.
Okay, all right.
I mean, you're already over time.
You know, people, there's people, let me just say one last thing. There's people also driving around, you see them through town. They want to retire out here because this is a beautiful area to retire to. You know, how does this come across to them? Okay? And last but certainly not least, okay, is what kind of an example do these people that we're talking about out there set for our young children growing up?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask future speakers to try to adhere to the 3 minutes. I know it's hard sometimes, but it's a guideline as per the lights here. Next, please.
Steve Perez, Hiachi Community Fellowship. Supervisor Gutman, thank you so much. Chairman Finnegan, thank you. I know it's maybe not necessarily exactly the process that you might have, but I think the fact that this is in front of us still is important. What really is the problem? Professional panhandlers and spontaneous giving. If you really look at the issue, and we have, as chair of the advisory board for Our Daily Bread Ministries, we've looked at this because we too have to be very careful, or at least when I was on the board, how we were expending our resources in ministering to people in very practical ways. So if you really break this down and take some time to think about this for a moment, you're dealing with an issue of a professional person panhandling, and they're very good at it, and they work the system. They present themselves as disabled vets. They have their little pets out there, and they have these pitiful signs and any kind of manipulation to grab the immediacy of the heart as you're sitting there feeling guilty at the stop sign, thinking that you just left Safeway, or you just bought some food at McDonald's, or you've just been shopping over at Walmart, whatever the case may be. So they play on that. So that tells me personally that education is really an important aspect in working towards reducing, eliminating professional panhandling, which is a lot different than people who have basic needs. So I understand I am making a distinction here. Let me make a couple of suggestions for you to think about and slow this process down just a little bit. Number one, I think in corners where people are gathering, you need to look at the hardscape. Not the landscape, the hardscape. So maybe the landscape needs to be turned into a hardscape that does not make it comfortable for professional panhandlers to hang around. So look at the way your grounds are designed, and maybe the county needs to look at that as well as it pertains to areas of right-of-ways. So if we have a congregation of panhandling going on that's more than 2 or 3 hours in the day, guess what? We are inviting them, not intentionally, of course, but the landscape that we're providing is making it very comfortable. The other thing that I think would be very interesting is wherever they congregate, what about signs that discouraged spontaneous giving? What about panhandling contributes to drunkenness, violence, addiction? A sign wherever they congregate at. Just let people know. Remind them that when you give spontaneously like this, you're giving in a very ineffective way. In fact, what you're doing is contributing to the problem, not bringing a solution to the problem. That's education. That's an important aspect of that. The other thing that I think we might possibly want to consider is working with the chamber, working with businesses, also possibly thinking about how we can incorporate rural human services in a way where we can educate the people, also harness spontaneous giving. There are communities throughout this country where in the stores themselves, they have parking meters. And people can bring their coins as they're leaving the stores and put them in the parking meters. And these parking meters are attractive, they're looking really good, and what they're used for is to collect spontaneous donations of change that are then turned over to various nonprofit organizations. In this case, it could be something like Rural Human Services. And then those fundings then are distributed out by them to provide meaningful, effective support to people who really are in need. The other thing that we may want to think about is the kind of education that we put in our hotels and motels and tell people, for example, this is our policy about panhandling. We ask you to think about what you're doing before you give spontaneously. There's opportunities. I think we need to have a greater discussion about this. Just that point.
Next, please. Any other public comment?
Thank you. My name's Tom Pawlowski, and I'm Director of Reach Out Ministries. And we're a Christian ministry, and we actually help people on the streets of this city. Perhaps you've seen us on Sundays, often distributing food and also praying with people and ministering to them according to the Word of God. And I just want to thank you for all the comments that have been made. And in my experience, this is a very difficult issue. And I think that Pastor Perez made some excellent points. I also think, Mrs. McClure, you made some excellent points as well about the constitutionality of this, and how when we prohibit one form of free speech, we open the door to prohibit other forms of free speech. But I really want to just, in this brief time that I have, come back to, I think, a very simple point, and that's that each person that is out there holding a sign, they're an individual person, okay? And some of them have less than honest intentions. That's true. My experience has been that virtually every person I have ever offered food to that had a sign that said, "I will work for food," they accepted the food. I think in my 15 years of ministry, maybe one person that I can recall refused food when it was directly offered. Something to keep in mind. I think it would be an excellent idea to have a program to educate people. What are the signs of a professional panhandler? What are the signs of a person that genuinely is desperate for help? And the last thing I would say is that, again, Ms. McClure, she mentioned that we do have a Judeo-Christian ethic that we still work under in this nation, in our government. And someone did say that there will be a day when nations and governments are held accountable for how they have treated what Jesus called the least among us. And so we will be held accountable for how did we clothe the naked? Did we help those that were imprisoned? Did we feed those that are hungry? And to the extent that we helped or did not help, we were doing those or not doing those things to a higher authority that we answer to. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, at this time, Commander Athey had asked you to weigh in on the problems with, and part of this was, I did receive an email from Supervisor Gitlin requesting a first reading be put on the agenda, and my response was, please have a complete board report available for the agenda regarding not only the cost of the signs, but for the anticipated enforcement of this ordinance. I think you should also include a report from the sheriff and the DA regarding the prioritization of citing and prosecution associated with this new ordinance if adopted. And you might even want to touch on the existing ordinance and the prosecution and the costs. Went on to say, since we already have one associated with aggressive panhandling along with the city, have you communicated with the city for their input regarding inclusion in the enforcement? And also please have a copy available for county council to review. Can you just address where with the existing one, what are we doing, how practical it is? I mean, and
well, the reality has always come back to the basic facts that we could have millions of laws on the books, but if we don't have the people to enforce the laws, it's impossible to get there. And as I've had discussions before, this county ordinance, I spoke to a sergeant out of Medford Police Department. He said, yes, the perception is it does work well. It did get the people off the center mediums, which the city of Medford was having the difficulties with, which was causing traffic issues and traffic collisions, and they did have pedestrians hit by cars. But it moved them to side streets. It's not eliminating the panhandling, it is moving them to another location. We are at the end of that cliff, and we are forgetting to look way back into the past to figure out what's causing this in the first place. We have professional panhandlers. We have people that really do need help. Try to get them help is difficult to do. We, as law enforcement, have to look at everything on a priority basis. If somebody's calling us for a domestic violence call, are we going to deal with that one first, or are we dealing with the panhandler on the corner? We're going to the other call first. That's what it comes down to. It's just going to, and I was asked to put together something in regards to the potential cost to our office. I can't give it because we are out there. I did say that I would not put somebody on overtime to watch the corners because I just cannot afford that. I need the overtime to cover the shifts that we have. So yes, there is going to be a cost, unknown, determined how much. And the bottom line is it determines what the board wants to have for the community. If they want to look at just, okay, let's take care of this one issue on these corners and let's move them on to someplace else, that's what you do. If it's another one, let's see what we can do to help the people or to make a panhandle ordinance versus somebody that really does need help. We got to be able to provide those services. As an example, Beverly Hills has one of these ordinances. You don't see panhandlers on the street, but drive through Beverly Hills, you'll see them on all the side streets. And there is homeless in Beverly Hills. There is people panhandling in Beverly Hills. You don't see them on the main road because they've been moved off. They're still there. As a community, we've got to figure out what to do with the issue beforehand it gets to that point.
I know the city had their ordinance, and I think it was really, wasn't identical verbatim, but it was more or less identical.
Correct.
I know that Chief Plack at the time was a little more aggressive for a while, and I don't know
Yes.
if he's doing handouts and moving people along.
Correct.
Unfortunately, some of them just moved into the county.
Yes, they did. That's where a lot of our issue came from.
Yeah. Did you see anything that they were doing that we can go back and look at as an effective method of diverting these people?
The whole program that Chief Plack put together from beginning to end, and he addressed more of the homeless rather than the panhandlers, I did think worked. They went to each encampment. They provided them brochures and different information, and they took people from the different organizations to go meet them and try to get help and find out why they were there. Are they there because they want to be, or is it because their circumstances put them there? Because there are the two. We do come across folks that's how they want to live their lifestyle, and that's how they want to be. That's their business. And so I think one of the issues we had here, not just too long ago, in the summertime, when the area behind Safeway was cleaned out, is it increased the population of the county tremendously. Anything that does occur, the city and the county have to be together, because all we're doing is moving them over one magical line. And that does hurt both ends, because we saw a huge increase in the homeless in our area, and we have very little that we can do about it.
Appreciate it, Tim. Thank
Okay.
you for your input.
I did
Yeah,
have a quick
go ahead.
question, though. I guess the point on the ordinance going forward is if we tweak it or change it or adopt one or what we would need to know, obviously keeping the, constitutional rights in mind, we need to know if you guys have the right tools to be able to do it. Because I know on the law enforcement side, it's very important to say, that we have the ability, if we have the bodies to enforce this, is it the right tool to be able to use? So
Correct. The
that would be.
panhandling ordinance from Medford does provide an additional tool. It's not used greatly. I was told by the sergeant that they had a major influx, and their city council dumped a tremendous amount of overtime into having every officer on corners for about 2 weeks. After that, it died down because they all moved. He says, so it has leveled off. And so, yes, it was a pain for the first couple of weeks. After that, it calmed down. It does give us a tool to do something, but it might not be the right thing. We need to follow it up with something else, other than just citing the driver by doing this. If the person pulls off to the side of the road, they're parked legally and they want to hand somebody an item, that's their business. The ordinance was developed because they're stopping in the middle of a red light or the green light and oncoming traffic is coming. That's when it's starting getting dangerous. That's another tool we can keep people moving on. The corner at Washington and Summer is extremely busy because there's only one exit out of Walmart, and out of all the apartments behind, that's the only exit. It is a very busy intersection. Having one person stop and having a person run into the middle of traffic to accept that donation or accept that gift puts them into jeopardy. They need to move off the side of the roads. And that was the idea of the ordinance in Medford, is that they're standing in the mediums, they're walking into the middle of traffic to grab the item. People are getting hurt. It is a tool, but it's like anything else, is if we're going to be there, we see it, and we're going to be able to react. Hopefully, one of the thoughts are that a lot of ordinances and a lot of vehicle code rules and regulations are for the people that are going to abide by them. And somebody sees the sign, they might not stop. It's not to harass or to do anything, it's to try to keep that corner safe, along as other corners too. In the city, There's also problems at the Jedediah Smith Shopping Center driving out of their main exit at McDonald's. There's people standing in the roadway. It's dangerous.
Tim, I'd like to ask you a question. My conversations were with the Code Enforcement Department in Medford and the chief of police there, and he's indicated to me in 2012 there were 9 citations for the entire city. And in 2013 there were 11 citations of essentially pulling someone over, citing them for giving something through the window. It was a $75 fine. And as you said, it was chaotic for a couple of weeks, and then it sent a message. Now, my question is, would this be an effective tool when you're seeing this implemented with proper signage, that if a deputy is driving by and he sees this going on, I'm not saying even extra service, when you send that message out to the community, will it reverberate? And will it say, you can't do that anymore? There's a sign, there's an ordinance that says you can't hand something through the window unless you're legally parked, which is fine. You want to pull over and make a separate stop, come over to the parking lot. That's perfectly legal to make your generous contribution. So I'm all in favor of that. But do you think that the mere signage there, and the signs would be about $200 each, the actual cost of $3,000 I put on there is considerably higher. But we're looking at about $1,100 total to put the appropriate signage around. Do you think it would be an important tool in settling down and calming this problem, which obviously has some aggravating effects in the community?
Signage will always lower a problem area to a certain degree because of the people that will obey signs. And those are the people that are never cited, because they're going to be the ones that are going to see the sign and move to a proper location to stop. I don't see a lot of citations occurring, and it's a county ordinance. It wouldn't be going to the courts, it'd be going into the county hearing officers. So I think the signage would deter, and if we could, but we need to back that up also with some education to the panhandlers on the street. This is not going to work here at this corner anymore. You need to go someplace else, and here's other places that you can get help from.
The second part of my question has to do with, now that the city of Medford has done this, and in fact Curry County has implemented this ordinance, will this have an effect where people are going to come to our area because it's user-friendly? Will that happen?
It might. We get our normal transient traffic from not mainly Medford, but we get them from Brookings and from Curry County to us, and then they'll roam back up to the Brookings-Curry County area. We see them in both places a lot. Pardon? They're the same people. It's a transient community that will just move through, and it's a lot. We do. The Medford authorities do see some of our transients from our area because when the weather changes. Right now, our normal homeless transient encampments are lowering because now the major rains are hitting. That next summer they'll be back, and we recognize them from year to year because they're just travelers.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Before I bring it back to the board for possible direction to staff and to have that discussion, I'm going to allow council, county council to weigh in if you feel anything's appropriate, as well as the CAO.
I think whatever direction the board gives, obviously, this is the discussion that we had hoped to have at this point, and then whether it becomes an ordinance amendment or not will be up to the direction of the board and the referral to a specific department.
Okay. All right, back to the board here then. So, what's your pleasure? I think there's been a lot of good conversation. If somebody else doesn't bring it up, I'm going to bring it up with some of the suggestions that we heard.
So I think we haven't done it in a long time, but I think putting this topic on a joint city-county meeting would be the best thing, because as mentioned earlier, you mentioned it, Chair Finnegan, was you've got to have the city of Crescent City involved in whatever we do, so we don't have what ended up happening is, as Commander Athey put, is all the transients. And by the way, if you've gone to the shopping center, Safeway, McDonald's, they've got a stricter ordinance, but it's not enforced. So you have transients there anyway. So it comes back to bodies also to be able to, put the right tool in place, but can you enforce it? And I do agree there is a balance. A lot of this is balance. We need to balance, the First Amendment rights, but you also have the right for someone to feel safe going shopping if they are, or going to and fro places. So I don't think that can be neglected at the same time. But my suggestion would be we put this on with the joint city-county meeting with the idea that we get a uniform ordinance going forward, and then possibly a working group going forward to dealing with the homeless issue that's there. I mean, there's bigger problems there. It's been brought up by several people, and I don't think we can just pass a law and it's going to go away. So that would be my 2 suggestions.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree that if we're going to take this up, it needs to be with the city and the county. But I would really like to stress the idea that we need an initiative of what we're going to do, not just a law saying we're not going to do this anymore. The idea about the meters is good. There are some communities who have food coupons that if you want to be a spontaneous giver, you buy a little stack of those and you pass them out. San Luis Obispo County has a pamphlet that identifies what aggressive panhandling is. It also identifies what to do if you're a victim of aggressive panhandling in relationship to the information that you will need when you call the police to tell them what to do, and kind of breaks those steps down. It also identifies places that you can give to assist people who are hungry or homeless, because the folks that are living, you know, in a bush behind the fairgrounds, I don't know if I would call them a professional panhandler. I mean, I know that those folks exist, but I also know that we have a big problem in our community. And so this may be a opportunity to increase the discussion of what kind of initiative do we want to do. I like the idea about changing the hardscape, that could be, because like right there on that corner, there's a great little piece of grass to stretch out on. And if those were bushes and you can't lay down on the sidewalk, you may be less inclined to want to stand there all day because you can't get comfy, you know. And we also know we have laws that all the dogs are supposed to be licensed. So there's an opportunity, there's enough there for someone to be engaged with the police officer. As far as, is your dog licensed? Well, then you better be moving on because you need to have that dog license. So the laws are there, but the laws are just more laws. And so I think we could look at this as opportunity to figure out an initiative for our community on how do we want to handle this collectively, and not just try to push people back into the bushes, because I don't think that they're moving. And I have had the opportunity, I travel up and down this coast every month, and I have been in every town, and I can tell you I ran into panhandlers in Del Mar where, you know, the average income is over $1 million a year. I've ran into, I mean, they're everywhere. But it's how communities deal with it. I know that like San Mateo County they've actually identified a parking area for the members of the community who live in their cars. And so if you are living in your car, here's where you park, because it puts everybody kind of together, and it makes it an easier way that you're not playing cat and mouse trying to find out where people are. But they've come up with solutions. They've come up with solutions about camping, where there's actually homeless encampments that are authorized. In other words, so then there's potable water and there's a place to use the restroom. Not glamour camping or anything, but there's communities across California who are taking a really proactive stance. Instead of saying, woe's me, we've got all these homeless people, we should make a law against giving them any food. So I see this as an opportunity and hope we take it to that level as an initiative of what to do in our community.
Go ahead.
This is a big national problem. It's not a problem for Del Norte County or Crescent City inclusive. This is a big national problem. You got that right. I don't know if we're going to solve it here today or tomorrow or into the future, because this is a huge problem. It started when Governor Reagan opened up the mental health hospitals back in the late 60s, and it's manifested to where it is today. It's generational. But we have people here who are being adversely affected. Businesses suffering. I'll read them to you again. Public urination. Public intoxication, passed out on a corner. That costs money. You got to dispatch an ambulance to do that. The public image of people coming into our community, wanting to settle here. What does that do? You're going in, oh, let's go shopping, and you see this going on. There was another sign there, I didn't put it part of the package, of someone holding up profanity. Someone purportedly on. It was too offensive for me to put here forward, but this is what's going on now. Damage to the lawn, damage to the sprinklers, damage to business retailers. Dogs that are not licensed, maybe rabid. So this is a huge problem. It isn't just local. And now we have two governances which are adjacent to us who've acted on this in an attempt to deal with the problem, in essential, push it out of their community, just like the city of Trinidad has buying one-way tickets to send their homeless up to Crescent City. No lie there.
Supervisor Gitlin, did you want to
Yes,
make a motion?
I'll make a point.
No,
I'll make a point, and then I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Do you want to make a motion?
I'm saying to you at this point that we must deal with this now, and we must deal with it in a way which is compassionate to those who legitimately need help, and to those who are abusing the system. This is a clear message. We need to stop this. So my motion would be to table this action until further action, and I'll await the city-county joint meeting to take place, and then we can bring it back to this board.
Well, there has to be a recommended action that is duly made and seconded to be able to table something. So there's no reason to make a move to table it. Do you have a...
Well, is there no motion? I cannot table this action, table this matter, change
I can
this?
put it on for a different agenda. I'm certainly going to offer some direction here, but I was inviting a motion from you since you put it on the agenda.
Well, it's obvious to me that some of our board members don't feel they have all the information.
Okay.
And as much as I tried to lay out the cost of this and what it is, there's a lot of unknowns and probably never be knowns as to what this is. So what the motion would be, if I made it, which I'm not making today, is to adopt a citation fine to stop this practice. I'm not making that motion.
Okay,
so I'm
since there's no
making the
motion-
motion to table this action till...
Since there is
till
no
further
motion
date.
on the floor, it's nothing to be seconded, I'm going to go ahead and weigh in on this as well. And I think that the key word here, and I think I cited it in the beginning when I chose to put this on the agenda for discussion, is the opportunity. As Supervisor McClure said it best, I think, and several members of the public that weighed in. It's an opportunity to have a discussion about this community and how we deal with certain issues. How do we deal with the charitable nature of our community? How do we deal with caring for the most needy? And how do we deal with separating those out that are professional manipulators that we do not want? I think a couple of ideas the county needs to look at, and maybe this is future facilities, or I could give direction to the CAO here to look at the hardscape in areas like Summer and Washington, where there are hedges to hide behind and to do the practices that Supervisor Gitlin has spoke about that are offensive, as well as just to lay on the lawn and take a nap. Perhaps if it was junipers there or it was concrete, it would not be so inviting. We've done everything but put a park bench out there. Okay, so, well, there's not a coffee machine either because it'd have to be free. But, so I think that's something that we need to look at. I think that the number one thing, and what was asked for in the beginning when it went on the agenda was, you know, what does the city have to say? There needs to be a joint city-county meeting on this, and I would ask that our 2x2 meet as quickly as possible to review the existing ordinances and discuss and highlight the problem and possible solutions. We don't want to just put up new signs, much like the signs across the street that say, if you have an RV, don't park here, that I think are probably rusted because nobody reads them. So maybe signs are a part of the solution, maybe they aren't. I don't think that's where you start your conversation. I don't also think that you start your conversation when we know that we don't have adequate staffing to prioritize, especially in this age of AB 109, to prioritize giving citations to people that we know the high probability that they are not going to adhere to, they're not going to show up to their trial, if you would, or their day in court, and then you have to do a warrant, and then you have to arrest them, and now all of a sudden they got a free night in jail. And that's not the intention. But neither is the intention if you're not willing to enforce the regulations, the ordinances we have now that say that you cannot panhandle from somebody in a car or a moving vehicle, and we're not willing to go after that person. I definitely do not see the answer being trying to criminalize the person that's giving. That's wrong. It won't work. Why? Because you can't enforce it with the criminal element, and by that I say, you know, they are not born criminals or acting criminals, but by the fact that they are not adhering to an ordinance, they have engaged in a criminal act. I don't want to criminalize the otherwise law-abiding citizen. So, what I would ask, since we do not have a motion, I would give direction that we engage in a 2x2 as quickly as possible. I would ask that 2x2 to review the existing ordinances. I would ask the landscape or the hardscape surrounding in our areas, Summer and Washington, to have future facilities, what can be done there if it is in fact within our right-of-way rather than in a private property, albeit Walmart or Home Depot, excuse me, not Home Depot, Ace Hardware. There's a faux pas I'll never hear the end of. And identify other places like this. Have that conversation not just with the governments, but also with the Sheriff's Department and the Chief of Police. Review what has been done in the past. And I invite members of the community like Pastor Perez that has some good ideas and that has had experience with whether it's the RHS or whether it's the non-denominational filtering of charitable, as well as social services needs to be there. So the discussion has started with one little infestation of a problem, and I think it has blossomed into acknowledging an issue in our community that we need to really have a hearty discussion and plan for the health and safety of our community, and then focus on what the real remedy is, not just for panhandling, for all the issues that were brought forth today. So I want to thank everybody, my fellow supervisors that engaged in the conversation, members of the public that enlightened us, and any questions on the direction, Jay?
Your mic's off.
2x2 with the city, discuss the hardscape, landscape, future facilities. I would include in that the primary would be engineering division. And we'll also engage the sheriff, chief, the police, health and human services, and I included probation and RHS.
Okay. Absent disagreement, then, I'm going to consider it to be consensus by the board that that's the direction to be taken. All right, thank you. Moving on. Item number 21 is legislative and budget issues. Jay?
Very quickly, there's a AB 1147, which has to do with dental outreach. It was signed by the governor. We will be following up on that to see what kind of effect, positive or negative. There is a CEQA update discussion going on right now. Obviously, that's something that we need to stay on top of. And as far as the waters of the United States, the board has sent a letter in the past. We're also having that discussion with our advocates to have direct discussion in Washington, D.C. Budget-wise, we are presently working off of the adopted budget and looking at some of the effects that could be coming our way. One of those could be the changes in PERS, not for this year, but for 15-16, and looking at the effect of AB 109 on that, on the jail budget.
All right, well, thank you for, again, it's been understated about the refinance. It's going to be a sizable savings. I'll let you tell us exactly how much when it happens, but it's going to be sizable annually for the next 15 years.
Yeah, as soon as it closes, I'll have the specifics, and I'll report back to the board in detail, and yes, at this point, it looks very, very promising.
And also the other component, aside from the signs for the veterans, that again came from RCRC through Les Baugh to me, to you, to Heidi, to Caltrans. You brought it full circle when you did find the funding for the signs through the Veteran Services Office, so great work on that to allow that to happen.
Yeah, Chris Thorpe, the Veteran Service Officer, has some outreach money that was available to be able to pay for those signs, and that was fortunate.
Good. Anything else for this board? If If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much. I might mention that the next meeting will not, is on Veterans Day is canceled, and so it will be in the fourth Tuesday of November. Thank you.